My mom placed her hand on the wheel like she was pinning me to the table. Then she looked straight at me and said, "Calm as ice. You won't get a single cent." The room didn't move, not a breath, not a blink, just that sentence echoing in my skull. Dylan smirked. Laya hid a smile behind her glass. Something inside me loosened, slipped just enough to hurt. I lowered my fork and knife with care, the way you do when you don't want anyone to hear the sound, like laying something to rest. "All right," I said quietly, "then don't expect a cent from me either." I thought that moment was the betrayal. I didn't realize yet that it was only the warning shot. I drove to my parents' house that night telling myself it was just dinner, just a normal evening in the suburbs, 40 minutes outside Portland. Lasagna, polite conversation, familiar warmth I pretended still existed. The sky was already black when I pulled into the driveway, the porch lights spilling onto the steps like an invitation I half believed. I should have known better. The tension was there the moment I stepped inside. The air felt too still, like everything had been arranged and was waiting. My mom barely glanced up from the oven. Dylan and Laya shared a look too quick to challenge but too loaded to miss. I told myself I was imagining it. I always did. The house smelled like garlic and tomatoes, like lemon cleaner rubbed into counters every Friday. Familiar, comforting. I hung my coat on the same hook I'd used since high school and walked toward the dining room. The table was perfect. Cloth napkins folded just so, wine glasses polished, candles already burning. They only did this when they wanted something or when something unpleasant was about to happen. My stomach tightened. "Rebecca, you made it," my mom said brightly without turning around. Her voice smiled even if her shoulders didn't. My dad nodded once, the way he did when he planned to stay quiet. Dylan buttered his roll with unnecessary focus. Laya sat beside him, phone glowing against her sleek hair. "Big city sister finally joins us," she murmured, eyes still on the screen. I ignored it. I'd been ignoring comments like that for years. We sat. My mom set the lasagna down like this was any other family dinner, but the atmosphere felt stretched thin, fragile, like it would tear if someone breathed wrong. Small talk filled the space. Work, weather, nothing that mattered. My mom asked about my latest project. My dad mentioned a leaky faucet he wanted help with. The twins whispered. Underneath it all, something waited. As I cut into my food, I caught my mom watching me, eyes sharp and assessing. It reminded me of every time she said family sticks together right after forwarding another expense. Mortgage payments, utilities, Dylan's third major, Laya's influencer equipment, repairs on the lake cottage they loved but never maintained. All of it quietly routed through me, the responsible one, the oldest. I used to think helping meant I was loved, that usefulness was the same thing as value. Lately, it felt like everything I gave vanished the second it left my hands. My mom cleared her throat. "We're glad you're here tonight, Rebecca. There's something your father and I want to talk about." Dylan sat up straighter. Laya locked her phone and placed it face down, already smiling. My chest dipped with warning. This wasn't dinner talk. My mom reached not for her fork, but for the folder beside her plate. Thin, neat, the corner worn from handling. She rested her hand on it like ownership. "Your father and I finalized the will," she said lightly. "We wanted you to hear it from us." The room tilted. Candle flames flickered. Even the refrigerator seemed to quiet. My dad stared at the table. Dylan leaned back, satisfied. Laya watched me like she was waiting for something entertaining. My heart hit once, heavy. "The will?" I asked. "Yes," my mother said, sliding the folder forward. "The house, the lake cottage, what remains in savings, it will all go to Dylan and Laya." The words landed so casually my brain rejected them at first. I stared at her, at the folder, at the way she said everything like she was listing groceries. "I'm sorry?" She continued smoothly. "You're doing well. You don't need anything from us. Your siblings need support. They're still finding their path." Finding their path. A path funded by me. Dylan smirked. "Just wanted everything clear." Laya smiled sweetly. "You always land on your feet, Rebecca." I swallowed the laugh burning in my throat. "So let me understand," I said quietly. I paid the mortgage, covered the bills, funded Dylan's education carousel, fixed the cottage so you could enjoy it, and I get nothing? My mom sighed. This is why we didn't want to tell you yet. You always make it about money. Because I'm the only one providing it, I said tightly. My dad finally spoke, barely audible. You'll be fine. You're stable. I looked at him. He couldn't meet my eyes. Laya shrugged. Maybe if you didn't try to be the hero. Dylan laughed. Nobody forced you. No one forced me. The phrase stripped years bare. Something inside me pulled tight and settled. I smiled. Calm. Finished. All right, I said softly. Then don't expect a cent from me either. The table froze. I folded my napkin neatly, set my utensils down with care, and stood. Their faces blurred as I walked away. They thought the will was the betrayal. They had no idea what they'd just started. The drive back into downtown Portland felt stretched, endless. Rain streaked my windshield, streetlights smearing into gold lines. My mother's voice looped in my head. Calm as ice, you won't get a single cent. By the time I reached my apartment, an ache had lodged under my ribs. Inside, everything felt off. I sat on the couch, phone vibrating endlessly. I didn't listen to the messages. I opened my banking app instead. Lines of payments filled the screen. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, transfers labeled help. I breathed out slowly and tapped cancel. Confirm. Again. Cancel. Confirm. It wasn't anger. It was release. When my mother finally called, I answered. Rebecca, what are you doing? I'm not your bank, I said calmly. You're part of this family. The way you treated me tonight? Silence. She hung up. Dylan called next, voice annoyed. You're overreacting. I crossed your boundaries long before tonight. What boundaries? He scoffed. You paid because you wanted to. Don't rewrite history. He hung up too. Then Laya, her tone was sugary, almost bored. Beck, seriously, you're embarrassing yourself. You're lucky you don't need the inheritance. Let it go. I blocked her. I blocked him, and then, because I knew what was coming next, I blocked my mother too. The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was a clean slate. The next few days blurred into a routine of work silence and brief pockets of relief. My coworkers noticed I looked tired, but no one asked questions. I was grateful for that. I poured myself into a new project that required long hours and travel, anything to keep my mind from drifting back to that dining room table. 3 weeks after the dinner, my phone lit up with a group text from my mother. Family meeting tonight. You owe it to us to be there. A familiar pressure tightened around my chest. Old programming, old obedience, but I typed back one word anyway. Fine. When I pulled into my parents' driveway that evening, the sky was a dull gray, the kind that hangs heavy before a storm. Dylan's car was parked crooked. Laya leaned against the railing, scrolling her phone. My father stood by the doorway, hands shoved in his pockets. My mom waited just inside, arms crossed, lips thin. They looked at me like I was the problem. They had no idea I wasn't the same person who had walked out 3 weeks ago. I was someone new, someone they couldn't control anymore. Weeks later, the nightmare didn't just hit, it arrived with the cold precision of someone who wanted me to feel it. I had just returned from Sacramento, rolling my suitcase down the quiet hallway of my apartment building. My shoulders ached, my eyes were gritty from the flight, and all I wanted was a shower and sleep. But halfway down the corridor, something felt wrong. The air smelled faintly chemical, sharp, artificial. Then I saw my door. It looked swollen, warped, like something had grown out of it. I stopped walking. Expanding foam, thick, hardened, pale yellow, was packed into every crack around the frame. It bulged outward like the door was trying to escape it. I touched it with my fingertips. Solid, dry, set. Someone had sealed my apartment shut. My keys slid uselessly in my hand. For a moment, I just stood there, steadying my breath. I didn't scream, I didn't panic. I simply felt something inside me get very, very quiet, deliberate, personal, punitive. My mind landed on Dylan with unsettling ease. Building management took nearly an hour to respond. When the facility's supervisor arrived, he stared at the door, eyebrows lifting. "Someone really wanted to keep you out." "That's one way to put it," I replied, voice cold enough to make him glance at me twice. A locksmith came next. It took another 2 hours to chip away the foam without damaging the structure. Bits of dried insulation sprinkled across the hallway floor like confetti from the world's most miserable celebration. When the door finally opened and I stepped inside, I didn't feel relief. I felt resolve. I dropped my suitcase, walked straight to my laptop, and pulled up the hallway camera feed. Fast forward, pause, click, scroll, then him. Dylan Hood, pulled over his head, baseball cap low, sweatshirt I recognized from last Christmas. He moved with a swagger I grew up watching, thoughtless, careless, convinced of his own invincibility. He shook the can of foam, he grinned, he sprayed every inch of my doorframe, and when he finished, he stepped back, admiring his work like some kind of masterpiece. I didn't gasp, I didn't cry, my hands didn't even shake, I just hit save. Then I sat back, staring at the paused frame. His face wasn't fully visible, but his posture, his shoes, his laugh, they were unmistakable. It didn't even matter if he thought he disguised himself. He hadn't disguised who he was. I called one person, Aunt Nora. She arrived 20 minutes later, still in slippers, her hair pulled into a messy bun. One look at the doorframe and her expression hardened. Inside, I showed her the video. She watched silently until the footage ended. Then she nodded once. "He crossed a line, Rebecca, and you know it." "I do," I said. "You can't keep absorbing their damage," she continued. "They will never stop unless you make them." It wasn't encouragement, it wasn't anger, it was truth. The next morning, I filed a police report. Calm, clear, factual. The officer watched the footage twice and shook his head. "This is vandalism," he said. "You did the right thing." I walked out of the station feeling the kind of clarity you only get when the last thread of guilt finally snaps. The calls started that afternoon. My mother first, rage layered under a thin film of disbelief. "How could you do this to your own brother? Do you know what you've started?" I answered evenly. "No, Mom, he started it when he vandalized my home." She ignored that, dropped the report. "No, you're unbelievable." She hung up. Next came Dad. His tone was controlled, strategic. "Let's fix this quietly, no need to escalate." "It's already escalated," I replied. "He broke the law." He exhaled sharply. "You're punishing him." "I'm holding him accountable." He had no answer to that. Then Dylan called. His voice was high, jittery. "You think you can get me arrested over a joke? It wasn't a joke. You always act like you're better than us." "I'm safer without you," I said simply. He cursed, yelled, tried to provoke me. I hung up. Laya tried next, sniffling like she was the victim. "Rebecca, this could ruin his life. He should have considered that before picking up the foam." I blocked her. Silence followed again, but this time it wasn't guilt silence, it was consequence silence. 2 days later, Dad called again. No greeting, no pretense. "What do you want?" he asked. It was always the wrong question from him. "I want the cost of the repairs reimbursed," I said. "All of it." "That's outrageous." "That's the number," I replied, "or the report stays. Your choice." He muttered something under his breath, then hung up. The transfer arrived the next morning, exactly the amount I listed in the report, no more, no less. The memo line read, "Settlement." For a long moment, I stared at the screen, not satisfied, not vindicated, but free. The money wasn't the victory, the boundary was. Later that evening, my mother called one last time. Her voice cracked, not with sadness, but with anger. "You've destroyed this family." I stepped onto my balcony, Portland's cold night breeze brushing against my face. "No," I said softly, "I stopped letting this family destroy me." She inhaled sharply. I hope someday, I continued, you understand that boundaries aren't betrayal. Don't expect us to forgive you, she snapped. I stopped expecting anything from you a long time ago, and I ended the call. That night, standing in the quiet of my apartment, I ran my hand over the new doorframe, smooth, clean, untouched, a symbol of something I'd never had before, a life where I wasn't the weapon they used against myself, a life I was finally choosing. Now, in the weeks after the incident, my world shifted in ways I didn't expect, quietly at first, then with a kind of momentum that felt like oxygen after years of breathing through a straw. There were no more midnight calls demanding explanations, no guilt-laced voicemails, no lectures disguised as concern, just silence. And to my surprise, silence didn't feel empty, it felt like space. The updates about my family didn't come from them, they came from Aunt Nora, who checked on me every few days. Evelyn had taken a morning shift at a diner across town, her smile reportedly tighter than ever. Thomas worked long hours at a hardware store, visibly worn down. Dylan quit his job again, blaming the stress of everything that happened. Laya drifted between ideas, unable to settle on anything that lasted more than a week. Their crises didn't swallow me anymore, they weren't mine to solve. Meanwhile, my own life began to expand. Work felt lighter, clearer. My manager noticed and offered me a leadership track, something I'd been too drained to pursue before. I slept better. I ate real meals again. My apartment felt brighter, even at night, as if the walls themselves had unclenched. I used the reimbursement money, not out of spite but symbolism, to do something I'd denied myself for years. I booked a 2-week trip to Italy. For once, I didn't ask for permission or worry about who else needed something from me. Florence was warm, golden, alive. Every evening, I stood on a balcony overlooking the rooftops, letting the slow breeze unwind the knots inside me. I realized that this peace, independence, possibility, was what my family had stolen from me long before foam ever touched my door. When I returned to Portland, I joined a hiking group. On my second Saturday with them, I met Alex, a calm, steady presence with an easy laugh. He didn't know anything about my family, not at first. He just talked to me like I was a whole person, not a resource to be mined. It was disarming and healing. Sometimes, late at night, I felt echoes of the old pain, not the sharp kind, just shadows, but they no longer controlled me, they no longer defined me. What surprised me most was this: I didn't miss them, not really. What I missed was the version of me who believed love meant self-erasure, but she was gone, and someone stronger had taken her place. I used to believe walking away from family meant failure. Now I know it can mean survival. I didn't lose a home, I left a battlefield. And in the quiet that followed, I rebuilt myself with steadier hands, clearer boundaries, and a life that finally feels like mine. If you've ever carried everyone else's weight until you couldn't breathe, hear me. Choosing yourself isn't selfish, it's the beginning of freedom. If this story resonates with you, tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next video.